Well, listen, from the muddy banks of the North Saskatchewan River right here in scenic Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, this is Jack Antonio on the line with Do You Know Jack radio show, and my guest today is the man, myth, and or legend himself, David Ellefson. David, how are you doing today, sir?
Great, man. How are you, Jack?
I'm really glad to get you on the line today. You're a busy guy, so I certainly appreciate your time. I mean, you got a lot of things on the go. You got the Basstory tour, of course, and you got the Megacruise in the distance, and you got a new book coming out. With all these things going down, David, I mean, what keeps you motivated? What gives you that drive to do all of the things you do?
Well, things just show up, and I think rather than sitting back and having a judgment about them, like, is this right for me? Is this good enough for me? Is this something I should be doing? I just put all that crap to the side and just go do it.
Yeah.
It's you just at some point you just say yes and you move forward. I mean, all I ever wanted to do is what I'm doing. Wake up, play bass, write songs, be in the music business, do this. This is all I ever wanted, and I've had a total singleness of purpose, a singular vision my whole life, and I feel like this is what I'm called to do, so this is what I go do.
That's awesome, David. I mean, I guess, feeling that purpose and calling, I mean, is that kind of what inspires you? I mean, how did you, what made you want to pick up a bass is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, the bass called to me. I didn't do it the other way around, It wasn't like I was searching through life going, what do I want to do with my life at age 11? I was just being the kid on the school bus, and I heard rock and roll on the radio, and it got me excited, and something somewhere reached into my soul and said, play the bass. And I just became gravitated toward that instrument, and I got a bass, and I sat in my basement on the farmhouse in Minnesota and spent every waking hour and every available moment I had learning how to play the bass and learn songs. Called my friends who were guitar players and drummers and said, hey, we should do some jamming, let's form a band. And quite honestly, I'm now 54, and that's what I do today, too. Really, nothing has changed, you know what I mean? It's the same thing. And my skills have probably gotten a little better, and some of the guys I play with, we probably have a lot of similar experiences because most of the guys that I play with are also that same guy, They're just kind of like, which is all we've ever wanted to do with our life.
Yeah.
And that's what we've gone and done. And I think as the saying goes, we didn't know we couldn't do it, so we went ahead and did it.
Now, you mentioned that you were 11 when you picked up a bass. I mean, how old were you when you heard the phenomenal bass legend Geezer Butler himself play?
I didn't hear Geezer until I was quite a bit older. I mean, I guess I probably heard Paranoid, because I played it in one of my bands when I was probably, 13, 14 years old. But honestly, I was not a big fan of the Ozzy years of Sabbath.
Oh, wow.
Paranoid is my favorite Sabbath record from the Ozzy era. But when I really got tuned into Sabbath was when Ronnie James Dio joined the band on the Heaven and Hell album. That was really my era of Sabbath. That, and in particular, that album and Mob Rules. Those were the two. And it's because that's the age I was at when I was being introduced to the current heavy metal that was going on around me.
Yeah.
Sabbath was cool with Ozzy, but it was kind of more of a throwback into Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin. And quite honestly, that was kind of a generation before me. My music I grew up on was Kiss, Styx, Cheap Trick, and Van Halen, Boston. And then as I started to get into heavier stuff, began that, Ronnie Dio era of Rainbow, Sabbath, Scorpions,
yeah,
Iron Maiden, Motorhead. That was really more my generation.
Well, I mean, of course, now thinking about that Heaven and Hell album, I mean, geez, some of Tony's riffs and solo work really come out in quite a masterful way, and at times he really flexes his jazz chops. And of course, Geezer had to be pretty, good with his supporting role. And I guess if we juxtapose that to your role with Megadeth, I mean, you have worked with one of the most prolific riff writers in thrash metal over the years. So, I mean, how would you characterize your own personal role within Megadeth and even just working with Dave?
Well, you're right. I think for as far as Dave and Tony, yeah, very, very similar path. Prolific riff writer is a good way to put it. As far as the bass role, very different in our two bands because Sabbath is essentially a three-piece band.
Yeah.
With a singer. We are a four-piece band, and one of the musicians also sings. So it's a very, whereas there's one guitar that anchors Sabbath. Geezer has a lot of liberty to go off and fill a lot of space, and can come from more of a bit of a bluesy, kind of background from a bass point of view, a lot of pentatonic stuff that he can fill a lot of the space with. In Megadeth, that's not the case. Because I'm bookended by two guitar players who essentially play on the rhythm guitar part very similar, parts. The riffs are really they're the building blocks of the song. So I'm kind of the glue in the middle that sort of ties all that together. So our roles are very different inside, our bands.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, of course, this is all in context of the fact that you are going out on the Basstory tour, and I think if my research is correct, you are literally chatting about some of the stuff that you just talked to me about as, some of the more prominent songs that you've played throughout your storied career in Megadeth, I would imagine mostly, but I would imagine too in some of your other projects that you've done over the years, right?
Yeah, I mean, one group that I got to play in was Montrose with the legendary Ronnie Montrose, and that was much more akin to what like the Geezer role, if you will.
Yeah.
It was not a metal gig; it was more of a hard rock gig, but it was very much kind of a Fender P bass into an SVT with a pick. That was kind of the style, just really hard driving. Rock and roll in very major keys and a lot of pentatonic stuff. But because there was only one guitar player, I had a lot of room to move around and play. Really, kind of take a lot of liberties with my performing on the bass in that setting. So that's one that I had that like that. I think also playing with Max Cavalera and Soulfly,
right?
For a metal gig, was a very really heavy, but also pretty musically advanced in the sense that there's a lot of moments to ad-lib. He would go off into this sort of reggae thing, and not probably deliberate, strict reggae, but this sort of island kind of feel that he had in his music. And it was fun as a bass player to play to that. Yeah,
for sure. You head out, like I said, on the Basstory tour starting July 6th, and that's a pretty a landmark event. Looks like there's about maybe, well, geez, I can count them because I have them right in front of me. There looks like there's about 10 dates. I mean, beyond September 7th, are you planning on putting a few more in? I know the Megacruise is coming up in October, so.
Yeah, we're actually in discussions with, my hope is to try to get up into Canada.
That would be fantastic.
I've been over to Europe before, and I'm talking about getting back over there again. Because this Basstory has a different approach to it, which is it's focused around a new book.
Yes.
And the companion album, Sleeping Giants. So this Basstory goes beyond just where Basstory started, which is kind of this clinic talking about, my life as a bass player and certainly, the Megadeth riffs that have, defined my career. That'll always, I guess, be part of it to some degree. But now, to have some of my own music and have it out on an album so that people can actually hear it. They can go to the merch booth, they can buy it, they can buy the book. The stories that are going to be told are going to be things that are more focused around the new book. So it's cool because, last year I got to basically establish the platform of Basstory.
Yeah.
And now this year I have a whole new initiative and purpose to go do Basstory.
Well, now I was going to talk to you about that because, for the first book, I think that one's called My Life with Deth. Geez, I forgot to write down the title of that one, but I think that's the title, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
You worked with Joel, and of course, with this one now, you've got your business partner Tom that's helped you with the book. I think though Tom's approach is pretty different compared to Joel's because just reading the foreword and some of Tom's descriptions at the beginning of this one, it almost sounds like there's a bit of a gonzo approach because Tom sort of takes an active role in the story because he's such a big part of it, right?
Yeah, it's funny with writing a book because, Tom, both my books, and I've written three, actually. I wrote another music how-to book back in the 90s.
That's right.
As far as the memoirs go, Joel MacGyver encouraged me to do My Life with Deth. He's been a friend of mine. He'd interviewed me several times for various magazines that he was writing for us, and he's a bass player, so he kind of knew where to sort of angle and position my book, My Life with Deth. And then, as that story was told, so much has happened since then that it really seems obvious that there should be another book. And every book, kind of like when you sit down to write a song, or especially when you sit down to write an album, it seems like a daunting task. So you just get started and you just start writing.
Sure.
Okay, we got another one, we got another song, we got another song. In this case, you got a chapter, you got another chapter, you got another chapter. And finally, after you get a half a dozen or 10 chapters or something like that, you're like, okay, the story's kind of taken a nice. It's kind of starting to position itself well. So you sort of, as you write about the various things. In this case, we wanted to write about the record label and coffee company and me coming back into Megadeth in 2010. Certainly the big 4 dates that we did. What it was like, being back in Megadeth now. With there's been a couple lineup changes already, and talking about that, and the Dystopia album, what it was like to put that record together, and to walk up and pick up a Grammy. So there was, pretty big stuff, to talk about. And, in this day and age, so much of our lives are, we put it on Instagram, it's on Facebook, it's on social media, you can watch it on YouTube. So sometimes you kind of go, geez, is a book even the best way to do it? Because, a lot of this information is already available everywhere,
Yeah.
But what I liked about More Life with Deth, and I think kind of the unknown that became the known in this one is that when I started talking about when we relaunched Combat Records, that suddenly took me as just a storyteller back to the very origins and early days of Megadeth, because that was Megadeth's alma mater, essentially, where we started was on Combat Records. And we inked our deal with them in 1984. So, all of a sudden, I got pulled back into telling the story of 1983 when we formed the group, and those years up really kind of through the 80s, and that is a period of the band that's largely been untold. And where it was told in print in big rock magazines in the 80s, those magazines are all out of print.
That's true.
There was not a lot of activity on MTV yet, so most of that stuff, there's some videos and stuff out there, but not a lot, By the 90s, by Rust in Peace, and, through the 90s, all of a sudden, that most of that information about Megadeth, from then on has been pretty well documented, and you can find most of that information out there. So that to me was this kind of the Easter egg, the little hidden sweet spot of this new book, and I think it's going to be fun for the fans to read about that and to go back. I've got a lot of people who were there with me at that part of the journey who also collaborated with me on the book and were kind enough to give their their viewpoint
Yeah, of course.
of how everything went down, which I think to me makes for a really fascinating read. It's not just me telling the story; it's me sort of laying it out and then letting several other people come in and tell the story too, which I think adds a lot of really fun color to the whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, I managed to crack the spine and get through a little bit of it just over the weekend. And, if the first, opening pages of the book are any indication, this is definitely going to be a phenomenal read, and I would highly recommend it. I read autobiographies all the time with what I do, and I'll have to say yours so far has been most enjoyable.
Good. Well, thank you.
So, I mean, you mentioned, Rust in Peace. I mean, I know the 30th of that, I think, is coming up next year. And I think, the 25th of Euthanasia is coming up. I mean, I know Megadeth has done different things over the years to commemorate. But I think there was a Rust in Peace 25th. I mean, I guess that begs the question, is there going to continue to be, 5, 10-year, 20-year anniversaries over the years, sort of quote-unquote celebrated by the band in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, last year was a big milestone of 35 years of Megadeth. It was 35 years since Dave and I met when we started the band in June of 1983. So I guess technically, as of this interview today, we are now in our 36th year as a band. We've turned the corner now. So, yeah, closing in on, 4 decades of especially a very real, authentic thrash metal rock and roll band like Megadeth is pretty incredible. We have lived the life. We've gotten to live the dream, but we've also lived the nightmare.
Yeah.
And anybody who's been in any kind of a band for more than a couple of concerts together, probably a lot of your listeners, people, who have, even if they're weekend warriors, man, it's like, you don't have to be in a band very long and you start to figure out, hey, wait a minute, these bands are kind of all the same, and, the people that are in them, it's like, these instruments, do we choose them or they choose us, like we talked about earlier in this interview?
Yeah.
There's a certain type of personality that's drawn to this line of work. There's a certain type of personality that is willing to make the sacrifices, and I mean, look, if it were easy, everybody'd be doing it. Everybody sees the bright lights, and it looks awesome. And it's our job to make the hard stuff look easy, and that's our job. It's show business,
Yeah.
But that's it's for Megadeth. Yeah, we have been down some harrowing roads, and I think that as anybody would who's been a musical artist for 35 years. So. But the good news is, look, there's a few that are still ahead of us. I mean, there's Iron Maiden, there's Judas Priest. Obviously, the Stones are the ultimate godfathers of this whole thing. And God bless them, for still being out there doing it. The Stones have, they sort of set the benchmark. And what I was saying is, 50 has now become the new 30, and apparently 70 is the new 50. So we keep going, and we create, fortunately, we've been blessed to have these legacies that are really, they're driven by our fans, and if our fans want us to go out and do 20 and 30 and who knows, maybe 40-year anniversaries, then, we're here to give them what they want.
Yeah, well, and you guys are far from a band that would take a victory lap, too. I mean, like, you guys, just recently, especially with Dystopia, I mean, this is some of the, arguably, at least from a critical standpoint, some of the strongest material of your entire career.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, we're not a band who just rehashes the same riff. And I mean, in fact, it gets harder to write new Megadeth music because rather than just defaulting to old formulas, we're very critical of every riff we play, every note choice, every lyric. We've been in the studio here, writing and doing pre-production for the next album, and anytime something comes along, we go, you know what, that kind of sounds like Liar from So Far Sweet Water. We kind of have a song already like that. It has an opening, kind of like 502. We need to change that,
Yeah.
And especially me and Dave, we're very critical because we've been there through the journey. So we know what the notes are, we know what the riffs are, and same with the lyrics, So we're very critical to not just repeat ourselves.
Sure. Yeah, and David, I didn't want to make this a thing. I mean, just let me say that my heart goes out to Dave, and I'm really hoping that he seems to be just ready to. To fight this nasty disease that he's got, and I would imagine the entire heavy metal world and beyond is behind him. And one thing that I really respect is Dirk just I think maybe even yesterday posted a picture that Dave is actually working in the studio. I mean, much respect goes to him for just continuing to do what he does as best as he can, I suppose.
Yeah. No, much appreciate that. Yeah, look, thoughts and prayers are much appreciated. I mean, I think last week when the announcement went out, just an overwhelming amount of support to Dave and to the band, and for him to get through this, and it's yeah. So it's look, I mean, it's underway, and in the meantime, we're forging ahead on creating and doing the things that we can do, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But yeah, his healing and his treatment and healing is, of course, first and foremost before everything. So appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Right on. Well, listen, I mean, the last thing I was going to bring up is the Megacruise coming up October 13th to 18th. Seems like it's going to be quite the lineup. I mean, it looks like Anthrax, Testament, Corrosion of Conformity, Armored Saint, Devil Driver. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, how did you guys manage to score such an incredible lineup in an intimate and interactive setting like a cruise?
Well, I think first of all, it was very focused. We wanted it to be very thrash oriented. Yet there was a lot of our friends, which you pretty much just named. Those bands are all friends of ours that we toured with and have grown up with. So it seemed pretty obvious that thrash genre and stuff that fit well together in kind of an age group. And along with that, there's also some great young new bands that are coming on the cruise too, which is awesome. So I think this is the only thrash cruise out there, and how appropriate that it be the Megacruise.
Yeah, well, and a mariachi band apparently. I mean, how did those guys drop on your radar? I'm talking about is it pronounced Metalachi?
Yeah, Metalachi. Well, we are going to Mexico, so and the Mexican people love their thrash metal and they love their Megadeth. So it's a great way to make it multicultural. And Megadeth is very much an international, global band. So it's nice to be bringing in people from all over the world for this one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, David, it's been awesome chatting with you. I think the only thing maybe we didn't cover was the coffee company. But I mean, for those interested coffee drinkers out there, I mean, where can we pick up a sample of the brew?
Yeah, EllefsonCoffeeCo.com is the website, and we ship all around the world, and so that's the place to go to get your coffee.
Right on. Well, like I said off the top, David, it's been a pleasure and an honor just chatting with you a little bit about the many things that you've got going on in your life. I definitely appreciate your time and your wise and kind words and your calm demeanor, man. It was a nice chat. You're very easy to talk to.
Cool, man. Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for your support.
Yep. All right. You have a good day, sir.
See ya.
Bye-bye.